On this episode,
I think no nerves for me would not be good. I try not to let it make me so intense that I can't just get out there and focus and also enjoy it. I mean, when you have only 10 performances to do a show you love, you want to be thrilled in every one of them. You want to love it. You want to hear the audience cheering and having the same great experience that you are. There is so much good theater in this region.
from the coveted corner booth in a little bar at the center of the Coachella Valley universe, welcome to another Big Conversation with Patrick Evans and Randy Florence, presented by the McCallum Theatre. Visit McCallumTheatre.org or reach the box office at 760-340-2787. Gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Howard. Yes, we are back in the prized and treasured corner booth at Skip Paige's Little Bar in Palm Desert, California. And we are delighted once again to offer you another episode of Big Conversations Little Bar. My name is Patrick Evans, and I'm here with my trusty sidekick, the gentleman who, when you think about what a sidekick should and does and would be, it is Randy Florence.
It used to be Robin.
It was Robin.
So I've surpassed Robin.
Absolutely. Wow. Absolutely. Why don't you introduce our guest this week?
I can't wait to do this. I have been researching for a week. Barbara Kerr is our guest today. Barbara, as I've already said, we need to plan the next 2 or 3 episodes with you because as I did that research, just following you from the beginning to sitting here today is an incredible journey. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I have had a very eclectic life, an interesting life, and I'm a really lucky girl. I've done a lot of things in different occupations, and the journey of my lifetime brought me here to Palm Springs in spring of 2018, and it's a thrill to be with all of you today. Thank you.
Well, you jokingly said when we sat down that people might say, who is she? But I said, everybody knows who you are, Barbara. You're everywhere in this valley right now. So I'm thrilled that you're sitting across from us.
I'm thrilled too.
So it all started where?
I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and in fact still have family there. Pittsburgh was a great place to grow up at that time. It was, almost like Leave It to Beaver or Father Knows Best, kind of neighborhood where you left your screen door open, you went outside, you saw neighbors and all of that. And, what I remember, I was a very good student. I learned well, pretty much straight A's. But what I remember most was from first grade on, I found something magical about being on a stage. They used to, in my little elementary school, they used to do what they called the May pageant. And each May, every class would perform one song. And that year, I think it was a bridal theme. I was not the bride. I was a bridesmaid, and I was terribly upset because my arch rival was the bride, and the groom was a young man whom I had a devastating crush.
Good-looking kid.
Good-looking kid. But every year, I would get cast in something, and then around 6th grade, we started doing musical plays appropriate to school and all that, and I was almost always cast as the mother.
Kinky boots. No, that's not.
No.
Yeah, almost always cast as the mother because I was tall, and still am, and I probably wasn't very good, but I was loud. You could hear me in the back of the school auditorium, and that love of that feeling has been part of my life ever since, and a dual path, if you will, in journalism, which kind of echoes what Patrick has done here. And that is really, if I look at my entire life, those two things, journalism and theater, have been the core of my life, my career, and the things that bring me joy.
Did it take you out of Pittsburgh early?
I actually graduated high school in Pittsburgh, and then I attended Ithaca College.
I have an Ithaca College baseball T-shirt.
I had a great time there, but I will say,
I really do.
Living other places later on, at Ithaca, we'd get 2 feet of snow, and, well, of course there are classes. Why wouldn't there be classes? Living other places, like near Washington, D.C., a half an inch of snow shuts everything down.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But no, I continued all the way through, and when I got to Ithaca, I'll tell you a candid story. I went up to audition for a drama scholarship, and my dad went with me because I'd never flown before, and I was terrified. Don't really like to fly. But I chose a terrible piece of material, and I did it absolute justice. I was dreadful.
What did you choose?
It was from an old play. I can't even remember the name. Oh, our hearts were young and gay. I mean, no one does this. And it was a terrible monologue, and I froze and I choked up. And on the way back on the plane, I remember thinking, well, if I can't even do that audition, I better make a career change here. So I loved Ithaca, though. I loved Ithaca College, and I'd always been fascinated by journalism. I was editor of the high school newspaper when I grew up in Pittsburgh. There was a wonderful woman named Marie Torrey. I don't know if that name rings a bell for you, but she was on KDKA. She actually went to jail to protect a source back in the Judy Garland days.
Wow.
But because she was on television every night, it never occurred to me that it wasn't something that most women did. So it didn't occur to me it wasn't a path. So when I looked at Ithaca, what I found was if you were a television radio major, you could take all of their classes, but you had to major in that. Drama was open to everybody. So I thought, well, I'll flip it around. I'll major in television radio and I'll minor in drama. And that was what I did. And I spent 4 years going up and down the stairs in the Performing Arts Building because the radio stations were downstairs and the studios were downstairs and the theater upstairs. I actually had Rod Serling as a visiting professor.
Wow.
It was great. He brought in old Twilight Zones and he'd talk about them. Very diminutive man and constantly chain smoking.
Yeah.
Looked like a heart attack waiting to happen, and sadly, that is what
Eventually it was. Yeah.
Eventually it was. But it was a wonderful experience, and there's a gentleman I'll mention to you a little bit later when we talk to tie it to Palm Springs, who was a classmate of mine at Ithaca, but I'll hold that story for now. Ooh, the suspense
It's
builds.
going to be exciting. I don't even really want to talk about it.
I hope we remember to circle back to it.
I do, because I'm not really very good at it, so I hope you do.
Randy and I are not really very good about that sort of thing. We're not good at follow-up.
So you go to Ithaca, you take this two-path, although drama was, it sounds like
it
that
was your
the
first love.
It was my first love, and looking back, I did a lot. Ironically, I was in a production of Company, which I've just finished doing here in Palm Springs, a show that I dearly love, and we can talk more about Sondheim later if you like. But I did all kinds. I was in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. I was very, very lucky in terms of what I did. So after I graduated,
did you play the lead in that?
I did.
Wow.
I was Jean Brodie. Had a name like Kerr, you got to have a good Scottish accent. And after that, I wanted more life experience. I felt that I'd led a fairly sheltered life in Pittsburgh, and I wanted to learn more about life. So I moved to New York. I spent 1 year living with a friend out in Elmhurst, Queens, and 1 year living in Manhattan on my own. I did a lot of temp work. I worked for the College Entrance Examination Board. I was a temp typist. And looking back, I probably did more theater than a lot of my friends did, or that I thought I did. But I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. I would go into the Actors Equity Lounge because I did get my equity card, and I would see people there week after week and think, oh, not going to happen. Then I thought, they're thinking that about me. But after about 2 years there, and I did a tour of the Unsinkable Molly Brown with a woman named Elaine Cancilla, who went on to marry Jerry Orbach after they did Chicago together. Played Pocono Playhouse, great things, did some off Broadway, including a production of Hamlet, which was one of those where, I won't say his name, but so-and-so is Hamlet. Not as, but is Hamlet.
Oh,
and
no, say his name. Who was it?
His name was Herb Barnett. I don't know if he's still with us or not. But I was Gertrude. And the two stories that I remember the most, we had bad weather one night, and 2 people came to see the play. And they were too embarrassed, I think, to leave. But we all stood backstage going, maybe we should ask them if they want to do something for us, because there's more of us, than them. And then if you know the play Hamlet, at the very end, Gertrude is poisoned by a chalice and all of that. So one night, I walk onto the stage, and I'm looking around, and there is no poison chalice. And I thought, well, this is very interesting. How am I going to die tonight? Am I going to fall down some stairs? Am I going to impale myself? And I finally thought, oh, doggone it, I'll just go out and get the poison chalice and bring it back and toast to Claudius, and we'll move on.
And it worked.
I think you should just rewritten, like a version of Hamlet where Gertrude lives.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Shakespeare was good, but I think can be improved upon.
I think
it's been
so
a lot
too.
of years.
She did. She did. She loved him so much. But she was that period. She was useless without a man, I think, was what she felt. So she went from Hamlet's dad, to Claudius. But you laugh now, but that's how you learn.
So your goal was to make a living.
My goal was absolutely to make a living, but I wasn't. And one night, I went with a friend down to the Strasberg Institute, and Alan Alda of MASH fame was the guest speaker. And he talked about his career, and he was fabulous. And at the end, he gave a chance for people to ask questions, and someone else asked the question, how do you know, given how hard it is, how do you know if you should continue to pursue a career in the theater? And he thought for a second. He said, that's a great question. He said, honestly, it is hard. And if there is nothing else on planet Earth that you want to do that. But if there's anything else you like to do that to have a life and do theater for love. And I thought to myself, well, there is something else I enjoy. I actually majored in it in college, and it was broadcast journalism. So I packed up and left New York City, and after some time, managed to get a job at a very tiny TV station in Hagerstown, Maryland. WHAG
W-HAG.
W-HAG was the NBC affiliate. It was a very small team. I was one of the anchors and one of the reporters, and it really was a time where we were still using film. So I always say, I know why it's called B-roll, because for those of us who were in it at the time, there were two film projectors. One was the primary one with the interviews, the A roll, and the other was the supplemental graphics, which was the B-roll. And I mean, we used to take, it was almost like linear type. We'd have to put on black cards and use white things so that they could dissolve to have names. This was before Chiron or keys or anything else. So learned a lot. Was there about 9 months, as I say, long enough to give birth to a new job, and wound up in Youngstown, Ohio, where I was the prime anchor at WYTV, the ABC affiliate. And I was told later I was probably the only solo female anchor in a local market at that time.
That's a pretty big deal.
It was extraordinary. I mean, again, I was just doing a job, but learned a lot. I was actually in Youngstown. They call it Black Monday. Yes, Patrick.
Just to give us a little, if you don't mind, and you don't have to answer this question, but circa what year were you there?
No, it's okay. I was there. Let me see.
You can ballpark it.
I can ballpark. We're talking probably late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, late 70s, early 80s.
1976.
Yeah. Oh,
maybe
there for
the only solo woman news anchor in the country.
Okay,
so it would have been 77, 78 for WYTV. And because I was there on Black Monday when they announced that Youngstown Sheet and Tube, the big steel mill, was going to shut down. Everybody who was there remembers. And that town never bounced back. And it's striking to me because in Pittsburgh, which was also an iron and steel town when I was growing up,
right,
they reinvented themselves. They had several renaissances, and today when you look, higher education, healthcare, and the arts. So they were willing to go. Youngstown kept clinging to the dream. We're going to buy the mill. It will reopen. Someone will buy the mill. We will buy it, not realizing that even if they had, there were only going to be several hundred jobs instead of several thousands because of the way in which technology changed. And it breaks your heart when you read about the city today. It's still, so much of it is still from that time frame. They've never quite rebounded the way Pittsburgh did.
All right, so after Youngstown, where did you go?
After I left Youngstown, I was hired in Dayton, Ohio, at what was then the NBC station. It became ABC, and they bounced around a lot in those days. But a guy named Lou Prado, who was a veteran news director, he had worked all over the country, went on to work for Medill News Service for a while. Actually, he's been at Penn State forever. He's the Penn State historian.
So one of our previous guests, Chris Long, worked for Lou Prado in Dayton, Ohio.
I worked with Chris.
Did you? Oh, did you guys overlap in Dayton?
Absolutely did. He and a gentleman named Art Brown were our primary anchors. I was a reporter, and then I became a weekend anchor and did the new
Omar
news.
was the sports director.
Omar Wilmy. Oh, yeah. I used to go to Omar's bar after hours and play Pac-Man and all of that.
Omar's daughter. He was the sports guy.
Yeah.
And he was there for 150 years. But his daughter married Chris Long.
Yeah. They were both so good. It was a great time. It was a really great time to be there. It was a time. And I will put this delicately, but I've often said the worst thing that happened to television news was the day somebody realized it could be profitable. Because when I was taking broadcast journalism, PICON, public interest, convenience, or necessity. This is how you're supposed to serve the community. And so that was the focus. I mean, in Dayton, Ohio, in addition to covering local news, I was sent to things like I was sent to the Democratic National Convention in 1980, where Jimmy Carter defeated Ted Kennedy.
You covered a space shuttle launch.
I did.
You?
I covered a space shuttle launch because Dayton being the birthplace of aviation, and I mean I'll tell you a great story about that one. Then I'll bounce back to the convention. So we're driving in our TV2 van to go to Cape Canaveral, and we pull into the thing, and you look over on the right, and there's the NBC building, and there's the ABC building, and there's the CBS building. But we're looking for CNN. And where's the CNN Winnebago? And there it was. They had a set up on top, and when it was time for my live shot, I would climb up the back steps, and I would sit down, and I would do my live shot. But I'll tell you, it was magical. Having started with film, and then eventually evolving to videotape, being able to go live anywhere in Dayton, to be able to talk live by satellite to Art Brown and Chris Long. It was unbelievable. And the space shuttle sparkling behind you. It was an amazing experience. When we were with when I was sent to New York to cover the convention, we were owned by a small college, Grinnell College out of Iowa. And they had no other stations. So I didn't have anybody really to connect with.
Wow.
I had to kind of fumble my way around. So I actually have pictures back in the media area. Here's the Hearst tent, here's this tent and all that. We found a pillar, and we put up a little sign that said TV2 Convention Headquarters. We had a little Coke can for an ashtray. We had a paper bag. It was our hospitality area. But what we were shooting on video by this point. But what I realized was I knew what was going to happen the next night. So I could cover what I needed that night, and then I could do 2 tags, 1 tag for that and 1 coming up, so they'd have something new for say, and our videographer would have to drive to the airport and drop off the tapes so that they could edit them back at the station. I looked later, I sent back 32 stories in the course of 4 days. Wow. I have never worked that hard in my life, but it was an extraordinary opportunity. So we did that. I was sent after that to...
Did you cover a debate? A presidential debate?
I did, the Reagan-Carter one. And it was a really interesting experience because we were all in the big room in the background where all the media were connected. And at the end, I started to move, and I said to my videographer, let's go interview people. And we were leaving, and all of the media people were talking to each other. And I thought, well, that's odd. But we went in, and we walked toward the front, and nobody stopped us. And we walked inside the theater, and nobody stopped us. And eventually I interviewed Barbara Walters. I interviewed all the people there. I mean, got all this great stuff. Nobody stopped, but nobody else had tried. But I do remember getting in the elevator back at the hotel, and we were with some of the Carter folks. And they were so sure that he had won the debate. And I said, really? And they seemed surprised. And I said, well, I think if you were in the theater, you might have had one impression, but I think people at home may wind up telling you something else. And that was, in fact, what happened. So covered that, and then they sent me to cover the Reagan inaugural, and this was another case where went in without a press pass, without anything. Luckily, we knew some members of Congress who kindly allowed us to go into the building, so we're making our way through.
Wait a minute. She said, luckily, we knew some members of Congress.
Well, it was true. If they hadn't helped us out, we wouldn't have been able to go anywhere. They managed to get us inside the Capitol and other things. But finally comes the inaugural, because you needed a pass for everything. So comes inaugural day, and I thought, hallelujah, we're just going to go. So we go up to this big stand area, and there's the guard, and he said, well, do you have your tickets? And my face fell. I said, oh, no. And he said, no. And suddenly I heard somebody not too far away and say, we've got one ticket somebody needed. I said, yes, and I gave it to the videographer. And he said, no. I said, I can't do anything but remember it. You go. You get video. So I'm standing there by the king, and this guard comes over, this very nice man, and said, you know, you look sad. I said, well, if you must know, I've had a really terrible week. I didn't have passes to go anywhere, and I'm trying to cover all this, and I couldn't go here, and I couldn't go there, and I thought I could get here, and now you need tickets. And he said, oh, you don't have a ticket? I said, no. And he reached into his pocket, and he handed me a ticket. Oh. And so I got to go in, and I got to do my stand-up. I will never forget that gesture of kindness. I wish I had taken his name to thank him. But we did that, and then we actually went back to Ohio, and then fairly quickly we were told to go back to West Point because one of the hostages in Iran, which was the 444-day, we followed their imprisonment, basically. One was from Dayton. So was sent to West Point to cover it. And we were actually still on film, and my photographer didn't have a battery. So one night we're in Poughkeepsie, going all around trying to find a battery, a Christie, whatever they used to be called. So get up the morning of the thing, haven't had much luck, overslept, and I'm putting myself together, and come to find out that a very fine reporter for the Dayton Daily News had gotten an exclusive interview with him, and it's like, So we're running behind, and we're in the car, and I feel lousy. So we're sitting there, and I thought, I better put myself together, because if my mother sees me on TV, I'll look bad. So I tried to fix my hair, put on some makeup and all that. So I had a question. We're asking questions, and finally we're getting toward the end, and I heard Bruce Langan, I think it was, say, the blonde in the back. And I suddenly realized I was the only blonde in the back still standing.
That was you.
That was me. So I got to ask my question, and my photographer swears that I did it on purpose. I did not, but apparently he couldn't quite hear me, so I had to repeat it on national TV. You can imagine how heartbroken I was. But the news director was thrilled, everybody was thrilled, and it was a fascinating experience. Well, you know, Patrick, at its best moments, you're part of history. And you think to yourself, I can't believe they're paying me to do this, but don't tell them or they won't.
When you were trapped on the 10 in the hurricane, is that what you were thinking?
Oh, yeah, I felt like
can't
this
believe
is
they're
him.
paying me
I'm
to-
writing the first draft of history.
Of history.
Urinating on the center divide
I did
of the
not do
I-10.
that, but those.
Well, then you have not lived.
well.
That's right.
Those were
very fulfilling.
the moments that one remembers, and sometimes the
mentioned-
things that go wrong too.
You mentioned your mother.
Yeah.
How did your family feel about your path?
Oh, I think they were fascinated by it. They weren't sure. I always say, I have to think, it was the Dick Cavett show, and he was interviewing Lord Laurence Olivier. And Dick Cavett asked a question I'd never heard before, and he said, Lord Olivier, what is talent? And Lord Olivier paused for a moment and said, I think talent is an inherited wish. And I've always liked that answer, because usually if someone is gifted, you see a similarity somewhere in the family. Maybe not exactly the previous generation, but one before. My grandmother was a church organist, and my mother sang in the church choir. We actually have some records of her. My dad did not. My dad could play the piano by ear, but really no other training in that venue. But they knew that I loved it. They came to my plays, bless them, even when I probably was not very good. And I think they said, well, if you want to try it, we'll support you. And if you want to do something else, we'll support that. So I was really lucky.
That's great.
And both my dad died a number of years ago. He died in 1978. But my mother got to see a lot of what I've done. And I think of her often when I'm in a dressing room these days. I like to think she's looking over my shoulder, or she's on stage or out in the audience and enjoying it all.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break. We have to acknowledge our presenting sponsor, the McCallum Theatre. Season's underway. You need to get your tickets sooner rather than later, because a lot of these great shows are going to sell out, as they always do. McCallumtheatre.org is where you go.
The McCallum Theatre's 2024-2025 season is on sale now. The world's top artists, from jazz, pop, classical, and comedy to the best of Broadway. Only at the Valley's favorite place for great entertainment. Tickets are on sale now at the McCallum Theatre box office, by phone, or online at McCallumtheatre.org. Tickets sell quickly, so order yours today. A new, exciting season only at the McCallum. The McCallum Theatre's 2024-2025 season is on sale now.
Our thanks to the McCallum Theatre. Randy?
That sounds so professional when we do that. It's almost like we're doing this for a living.
What we do, I think, for the McCallum is very important to their portfolio.
Well, I wouldn't say we've kept them open this year.
I feel certain that they thank us as much as we thank them, or nearly as often. Burton Cummings.
Burton Cummings is coming in January. You know, I've said this enough times that I thought maybe you would just show up one day with tickets.
To Burt Cummings?
For me.
Are you
a gift.
They're charging you to see him?
Yes, they do charge for Burton Cummings.
All right, I thought that was a free show.
Well, you still got to pay those old gussos to follow us. So
we're back with Barbara Kerr, who's now we've been talking a lot about your journalism career, and so you were in Dayton. Where did you go following Dayton? You covered a lot of markets over the years.
I covered a lot of markets. That was actually my last television market.
You made a major shift in your career.
I did
at
make
that
a major
point.
shift. I actually had been at one station, and then Hearst Corporation came in and purchased the station from Grinnell, and there were a few people they decided that they could live without, and I was one. And I wound up at a competing station across town where I happened to be working with an incredibly handsome and talented gentleman by the name of Joe Smith.
We've heard of him.
I think viewers here who watch
CD king.
KMIR have heard of him here too. We did morning co-anchor. But
He's also sitting right next to you, so you have to say nice things.
Oh, I would
Right
say
here.
nice things even if he wasn't here. I would say nice things. It was great to work with him. We did get married not long after that, but what happened was Joe wound up getting a job in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at public television there, and his own show, Smith & Company, nightly talk show. So proud. It was so good. And that was at the point where I thought to myself, is that what I still want to do? And that, I think, happens more often for women in media. A woman around, let's say, late 30s, early 40s, if they're able, they will decide, I want to do this as long as I can. Or they'll say, I want to do something different. And I did. So this was back in the day when you still get the newspapers looking for want ads. And so the Milwaukee newspaper would get to Dayton on Thursday, and I'd go to the bookstore to pick it up. And so I'm looking through want ads, and one day I saw this want ad. They were looking for a public affairs officer for the Internal Revenue Service. And I'm the first to tell you, I laughed out loud. I thought, what
I did too when I saw
masochist
it.
wants to do public affairs? But then I looked and I thought, well, I might be an interesting candidate. I come out of media, which is probably valuable. I'm a woman, and I'm not one of those gentlemen in gray suits. That could be interesting. So I sent off my resume. I paid my own dime to go and interview. I heard later they'd had about 80 applicants, and they interviewed about 6 of us. And I was incredibly relaxed during the interview because I wasn't sure I actually wanted it. I was charming. I was absolutely delightful. And I wound up being offered the job. And I worked for the government for about 10 years, most in Milwaukee and then in San Francisco. But I must tell you, it was a really good experience. And people are surprised when they hear that I was able to learn. I work with great people. And it's like any large organization. There may be a couple of people who maybe don't do things quite the way you would. But for the most part, everybody there works so hard at such a difficult job, unpopular but absolutely essential. Taxes are the price we pay for a free society and our democracy. Yep.
And then your next one was similarly, maybe it wasn't one that people would look at and go, hey, that's a fantastic job.
Well, I went from there actually. Joe and I at that point moved to, I have to condense this all for you. After some time in Milwaukee, on the same day, Joe and I were offered jobs. He was offered a job at Las Vegas Public Television. I was offered a job in the Regional Public Affairs Office in San Francisco. And Joe, said, what should we do? And I said, well, what are the odds of this happening? So I said, I think we're supposed to do both, and we'll figure it out. So for about 2 years, we flew back and forth. And then we realized we needed to get back together. And when I say that, people often say, oh, because it was getting so much harder. And I sometimes think, no, it was getting easier. He'd show up and he'd like, well, what do you mean you need space in my bathroom and all of that? But he wound up getting a job at a fascinating place called Florida's News Channel in Tallahassee, Florida, which was designed to be like CNN for Florida. So I went there, and again, I'm looking through the newspapers and saw a couple of jobs and wound up working for a public relations firm with offices both in Tallahassee, state capital, Vero Beach, but also Washington, D.C. And I did a lot of work for them in Washington, D.C. I started as a media relations specialist, and then their director of media relations. It didn't work out for a lot of reasons, so I wound up doing that job. But we had some fascinating clients, including the American Society of Transplant Surgeons. I learned a lot, but I was spending more time than I wanted trying to bring in business than actually doing the work to serve clients. So I realized, I'm glad I did this, but it's not for me. And so then...
Barbara, throughout all of this, were you doing anything to feed the acting bug?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Oh, yes. I wasn't able to do it in Hagerstown or Youngstown, but starting in Dayton, I worked at almost every theater group with musicals from the classic Lady in the Dark, Applause. I had the Lauren Bacall role. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. I did a play, Monday After the Miracle, which not a lot of people have seen, but it's what happens to Anne Sullivan and Helen Keller after The Miracle Worker. I did multiple shows. I was, again, very, very lucky. And then the same thing in San Francisco when I was there. I did a production of Anyone Can Whistle. I did a lot of shows in Milwaukee with a lot of very, very gifted people and learned all along the way.
What's your favorite show?
I would say my favorite musical I've ever seen and probably to do is Stephen Sondheim's Follies. Company is not far behind, and Gypsy, the King Lear of musicals for women, is right up there too. And I've been lucky enough to do each of these a couple of times.
Oh, that's...
I actually saw the original Company on Broadway, and it was not only unlike anything I had seen, it was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. There was no traditional narrative. The story starts, here it ends. It's a series of vignettes to tell the story. The lyrics were so brilliant, the staging, the set, everything. And there's just something about Stephen Sondheim work that really resonates with me. And I know a lot of people find him, well, some people will say they find him hard to sing. I find it easy because it makes emotional sense to me. And I find that, his music and his lyrics and how they come together, if you really listen, his work is so moving. And I know also a lot of people tend to find him a chilly composer. I think his work is beautiful. If you see works like Passion or Follies, and I've seen most of the original productions. So all through, while doing television and in my later career, I have always done theater. It has always, always been there, including when we moved to Portland. We haven't even gotten to Portland yet, but Joe got a job at KGW, the NBC affiliate there, and I held two positions while I was there. I was a communications director, if you will, at Clark College, which was a 2-year college in Vancouver, Washington. And I was the communications director for the Sisters of St. Mary of Oregon. Now, sometimes when you say you worked for Sisters, you see people fold their arms or look down. They were the most joyful, wonderful women. It's a fabulous campus. They have education as young as 6 weeks all the way through high school graduation. So you could come into early learning, go directly to grade school, middle school, high school, and graduate. The first time I visited the campus, I was walking through the high school, and their lockers were open. And I said to the person I was with, "Oh my gosh, don't people worry about that?" And it's like, no one would touch anyone's things. The sisters would not like that. And I thought, wow, if you don't have to deal with that or think about that, you really can focus on education. And because it was a fairly small class size, everybody got to take part, and people cheered for each other. People rooted for each other.
Well, it must have been very nice to work someplace pure and honest. After working for the IRS, it was probably very cathartic.
I won't say cathartic, but
and
it was
the Treasury Department.
And the Treasury Department to work their
like
compassion and joy are part of their mission. Community care through faith and action. And it was just a lovely place, beautiful grounds, kind people, everybody devoted to the wonderful sisters who have given their lives. We would, once a year, we would honor sisters who were having they call it a jubilee, a 25th anniversary of 50. And some years you'd add up the numbers of 6 or 7 sisters, and it was more than 500 years of service. Really unbelievable.
Remarkable.
And again, always so joyful, so kind.
And what was your role there, Barbara? What did the day look like for you there?
I was the director of communications, so in my final...
She didn't tell them that she was married, and she became a sister for a while.
Okay,
She had to sneak Joe in.
But my sister-in-law is a sister of St. Joseph of Springfield, Massachusetts. So knowing her, respecting her service, I think gave me some insights into what the sisters did and an appreciation for that. But it was like a regular communications office. We did media relations, we did internal communications, we did publications, a beautiful magazine. Toward the end, we added social media. We did videos for YouTube. So it was a full-scale communication service office. It just happened to be on the campus of a community of sisters. Wow. And being in Portland, I didn't do quite as much theater there as I would have liked, partly because my jobs were very demanding. But I did do a play called Wit, which is about a woman who is suffering from terminal cancer, for which every actress who plays the role, you shave your head and you follow that. I did that. I did a play for Artist Repertory Theater. I did some for Profile Theater, which would at that time dedicate an entire season to one playwright, Wendy Wasserstein. I was in the Sisters Rosenzweig. I was in a couple of the Neil Simon plays, and just worked with really great people. And I think that was a time when I got really involved with the Public Relations Society of America. I should ask, do you need to take a break soon? Should I?
No. We've done our break.
We got another 3 hours.
Well, I found when I looked at my career, I get bored easily. You may not have figured that out by now, but I get bored.
I was going to ask, could you just not hold a job?
And when I looked at my career, there was kind of like a 5-year marker. And I was at Clark College in Vancouver at the time, and I was really enjoying it. But I was getting a little antsy, so I met with a good friend who was a PR legend there. And we had breakfast, and I said, I should join something, but I've never known what I should join. Should it be, International Association of Business Communicators, American Marketing Association, Public Relations Society? He said, Public Relations Society. I said, okay, why? And he talked about my career path. And I said, were you in it? He said, yes. Were you active? Well, yes. Turns out he had been president of the local chapter. He was among the first to get his accreditation, which is incredibly intense. So I joined, and a few months later, I went to their awards ceremony. And I walked in, and I didn't know anybody. And I was used to entering contests where you'd put in, pretty flyers and brochures, and you'd see all the pretty work. And on this table, there were these binders. And you'd open them and go, what are these? I felt so out of place. I knew one person that night, and he kindly guided me around. But I left early, and I thought to myself, what have I done? I really joined the wrong thing. So a couple of months later, I'm getting the newsletter, and I saw that they were going to have classes for what they call accreditation in public relations, or the APR. Now, I've got to tell you, I'd been thinking about it for 10 years when I realized that a colleague in San Francisco, I saw in the office one day, all these books. Oh, are you back at college? No, I'm studying for the APR. And I remember saying, I'll never be able to do that because I didn't study public relations in college. So 10 years later, I'm still thinking about this. And I thought, I'm going to write to the woman. So I wrote to this wonderful woman who was one of the teachers, and I said, this is my career. I said, I don't think I can do this. And she immediately wrote back and she said, are you kidding? Of course you can do this. You must come. Absolutely come join us. So what was great about the class was they explained how it happened. They told you what you would need to know, how to study, to prepare for not only they called it a panel presentation, but you went in front of a number of public relations specialists, and you talked about a project you had worked on. Could have been a great success, could have been nothing, but what they wanted to know is, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently? So I did that, and I got through, and I kept studying, and I think it was in August, I took the exam, which was very intense. You had 4 hours to do it. You had to go to one of those places where you didn't have to give up your watch, intense. But I passed, and I earned my APR. And in the middle of that, I saw that the chapter was having a class on how to enter the Spotlight Awards. And I thought, well, doggone it, maybe I'll learn something. So I went, and they explained that really what they were looking for was 2 pages on a project you'd done. What was the challenge? How did you research it? How did you prepare? How did you do it? And how did you evaluate it? Those were 2 pages, and the rest was just documenting it. I thought, Clark College is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year. That's been a pretty big deal. And we opened a new building, and we did a book. I'll try one. And the next thing I knew, I had entered 3 different categories. So a year later, I'm going to the Spotlight Awards. I knew so many people. I picked up 1 Spotlight Award and 2 Awards of Merit, and I got my APR pin from that nice man named Tom Unger, a dear friend who had welcomed me the year before. But I always say when I became chapter president, and I tell that story because the point is, it's like anything else in life. The more you get involved, the more you will get back. The more you give, the more you will get. And
if something inside of you keeps speaking to you, follow it. And that's what you did with the public relations thing.
Absolutely. So I wound up being chapter president. And then at one point, several friends who were in the chapter were elevated into what is called the Public Relations College of Fellows. You have to have been in the profession for about 20 years, and you have to have a pretty distinguished career and also service and leadership. And And I think it was 2014, I was in San Francisco when my friends were being inducted. And I met with a member of the College of Fellows, and I said, well, I'm interested. And I said, here's what I've done. And she said, well, your career sounds good, but your service sounds a little light to me. And I said, well, it's funny you say that. I just had someone reach out to me and ask if I would serve as president-elect of the chapter next year, and then president. She said, perfect, wait and do all of that and then apply. So I followed her guidance. I got a wonderful woman as a mentor and coach, and I applied, and I was inducted in 2015. As is my usual wont, I got engaged. The next year, I was co-chair of our mentoring program, and then somebody said, "Well, why don't you should run for the board, become secretary treasurer." And so you start with that, and then you're vice chair, and you coordinate the annual dinner, and then you're chair-elect, and then I wound up being chair in 2020, which was the year of COVID. So our challenge as a group was to figure out, okay, can we induct a class virtually? Can we hold a virtual induction celebration? Can we hold an annual meeting? Can we figure all these things out? And we actually did. I still refer to them as the intrepid class of 2020. We extended the deadline because it was a tough year, but we did a celebration online, and we had an annual meeting online, which they have continued to do to this day because not everybody can get to the actual international conference to be there. So that is a tradition that is last. We still have celebrations, and I think that was maybe one of my greatest legacies for PRSA.
I wanted her to tell us how you guys ended up in Palm Springs, and I want you to talk a little bit about the theater scene here because you've become so involved in that.
I would love to. Joe and I think we'll both tell you he loved his time in Las Vegas. I loved my time in San Francisco. But when
Joe told me, Joe and I have lunch from time, and he told me that he loved Las Vegas because every payday he'd go down into the casinos and he'd double his
and that's
paycheck.
Why I had to drive down. We couldn't even afford airfare. It was so sad. But when we talked about where we wanted to be next, I mean, we were when we left Milwaukee, Wisconsin, it was like, if I never see another snowflake.
Joe suggested Monte Carlo.
Yeah. I was ready. I was ready for
Monte
that.
Carlo would be great.
Yeah. And we loved Portland, but we were sick of the rain and sick of the gray.
Yeah, of course.
So when we started talking about places we had loved, these two came up. But when we were honest about it, we were remembering them both as they were 20 or so years ago. But one place we had visited and really liked was Palm Springs. So we thought, well, let's come, on a house hunting trip and let's see what happens. So it was Valentine's week of 2018.
February, good month to come.
Good month to come. And we went out on the first day. It was the second house we saw, we fell in love with, and wound up purchasing it. And so sold our house in 2 days. That Joe came first, and then I followed him. And really, we were going to, I'm going to put these air quotes, retire, because boomers never retire. We just reinvent ourselves. But what happened was Joe wound up first volunteering and then being hired at NBC Palm Springs. That allowed us to meet so many people and do so many things.
We'll edit that out later.
A shout out to everyone. And a friend of mine suggested, she knew I was a writer, and she said, well, I should connect you with Winston Giesica over at the Desert Sun. And, he likes that. So I started doing some freelance events for the Desert Scene column. And then one day, I wasn't doing theater yet, but because I am who I am, I said to Winston, I said, I've noticed that on all the websites for the local theaters here, and there are a lot, I see Broadway.com, I see this, I never see the Desert Sun. And he said, honestly, there are so many theaters and so many shows, we can't cover them all, so we don't cover
we choose not to cover any of them.
And I, of course, immediately said, well, that's a terrible answer. I said, even if you covered one show a year at each of the significant theater groups, they would know that you value what they do, what they contribute artistically and economically. So that was what I did for about 2 years. I would do one long feature story, like 1,000 words, on each of this. Now, remember I said I was going to swing back to Ithaca College?
Yes.
Okay, so we're in the middle of COVID, and I'm on Facebook one night, and so is someone else. I went to school with a man named Robert Johansson, who was the artistic director at the Paper Mill Playhouse in New Jersey, State Theater of New Jersey for decades. He had pieces produced for great performances. He did work with Beverly Sills at New York City Opera. An incredible resume. Had not spoken, seen, or heard from the man in all of these decades. So on Facebook one night, and kind of went, Palm Springs? And he was doing the same thing at the same time, and we kind of went, Are you in Palm Springs? Are you in Palm Springs? Yes. So in the middle of COVID, we reconnected carefully. And this was around the time that Stephen Sondheim passed away. And he said to me, wouldn't it be wonderful to do a tribute to to him. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, do something in your living room for some friends. The next thing I know, I'm on the stage at Coachella Valley Repertory with 200 people out in the audience, and we're doing a tribute with wonderful Kurt Jordan as our pianist. I was so nervous I could barely breathe. But what a joy to do that incredible music. And I will tell the story. One of the songs that I did that night was The Ladies Who Lunch from Company. And if you know the song that Elaine Stritch made, Immortal, there's a line at the beginning, talking about these women who are really bored because they've been sitting choosing a hat. And then she says, does anyone still wear a hat? And I looked out into the audience, and there is Ruta Lee wearing this beautiful big hat. And I managed not to laugh. But we did that, Robert and I, and then a year later, he did a tribute to Sir Noel Coward, and he brought in my dear friend Wayne Bryan, who was music director of Theater of Wichita, artistic director for decades, and Glory Crampton. We did that, and shortly after that, the local theater group, which is so vibrant, decided they were going to hold a group audition, basically, on the stage of CV Rep. And you could on one day, you could audition for everybody. You had 5 minutes, so I thought, well, doggone it, I'm going to sign up.
You pulled up the soliloquy that you did for your
I made a different artistic choice.
Okay, good.
I did. I
went a
thought
different
about
direction.
it, and I thought if maybe I could get it right this time. But
damn it, I'm gonna make this good.
They're gonna make this good. They gave you 5 minutes to do a monologue and or a song or whatever you want to do. I made the mistake that year. I went a little long, and I did get cut off. But I chose a comic monologue. I chose a serious one, and I chose to sing. And what they told you then was you would go into the lobby, and they said, please wait 10 minutes. And if a company wants to see you for callbacks, they'll give you a colored card. So I got this card, and I got this card, and I got this card. And I'm thinking, well, that's because I had no expectations. So out of that, I wound up being cast at the Bent in a play called Gross Indecency, The Three Trials of Oscar Wilde. I wound up being cast again at the Bent in the wonderful Terrence McNally comedy, It's Only a Play.
Oh, that was such a great show.
Oh, thank you. I just loved it. I wound up being cast in Sherlock Holmes Confidential at Desert Ensemble Theatre. And around this time, and Patrick can identify with this, Desert Ensemble Theatre asked me if I would be a contestant one year in Singing with the Desert Stars. I was terribly nervous, but I said yes. And while I did not win, I was apparently decent enough that they invited me back to be a coach this year. And I'm proud to say that my contestant won that night. So I've done that. Then Wayne Bryan, who I met through Robert as we did our Sir Noel Coward tribute, he was working with another talented artist to put together a tribute to Rodgers and Hart, which we wound up doing at Des Art Performs, straight to the heart. And I did one song. Everybody else was out there. I came out and did one, but it was a great song. It was a pleasure to be on that stage. And then I wound up auditioning for company at Revolution Stage, a part that I had done actually in college at Ithaca College, but never thought it would come my way at, let's say, an age-appropriate time. So absolutely thrilled to do it with such a good group. So the last 2024 was extraordinary for me, and the first part of 2025 is shaping up nicely. I will be going back to the Bent for a play called Perfect Arrangement, which is set in 1950 in Washington, D.C. with the backdrop of the Lavender Scare, the time at which the State Department is trying to basically root out employees who are gay. And there are two in particular employees who are trying to maintain their cover, and it's funny, it's moving, and it's based on historically accurate events. So that will be February 6th through the 16th. If you don't know the Bent, it's located in Theater 3 at the Palm Springs Cultural Center. Jason Real, wonderful, talented actor, is going to be our director. I want to get names right. Deb Harmon, Angela Landis, Jeffrey Norman, Terry Ray, Eric Sopola, Laura Stearns, and me. And then for one night only at the end of February, they do on Friday nights, Bonnie Gogallon and some other singers do an event called Razzle Dazzle.
Razzle Dazzle, yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And on February 28th, I will be a guest artist. And you can check out the Palm Springs Cultural Center to learn more about that. And then, this just in, I will be doing How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying at the Revolution Stage, which will be directed by Robert Johansson, with whom I did How to Succeed in Business at Ithaca College and on a USO tour many years ago. So
Wow.
My life has come full circle.
Full circle.
I have, yeah.
I'm fascinated by stage horror stories. Any story you can tell us about something that went bad, just really bad?
Well, at Gertrude, she didn't have the poison
Well, I didn't have
chalice.
well,
poison
that's
chalice.
not a good one.
That's
She had
one.
to run through that. Yeah.
We've had that. I'll tell you two. Actually, one happened during company. We were singing to music tracks because you wanted a big full orchestra sound. And one night, I'm halfway through one of my songs, and the music track went out. And I just continued on as if nothing else had happened because that will go. The best life lesson I ever learned on stage, I remember I said I did Lady in the Dark, which I don't know if you know the show, but it's a Kurt Weill musical, very beautiful. And it was way ahead of its time. It was about a woman who was a very successful publisher, but not successful in her private life. And she was in psychoanalysis. And so there would be these dream sequences. And there was a circus dream. And one of the supporting characters, a role made famous by Danny Kaye, it was a song called Tchaikovsky, in which this person would rattle off all of these composers' names. Truly brilliant. It was followed by my character's big number, The Saga of Jenny. So I'm sitting on my stool I don't know if it was opening night, one night, and my friend is starting to do Tchaikovsky. I said, perfect, I'll go over the lyrics for Saga of Jenny. I could not remember how it started to save my life. I could remember the tag. I knew your Jenny. I couldn't remember how it started. So he's continuing Tchaikovsky. I still can't remember. He's almost at the end of Tchaikovsky. I still can't remember. He's finished Tchaikovsky, and I still can't remember. He's getting thunderous applause. The music swells. I walk to the center of the stage. I open my mouth, and it was there.
Whoa.
But it was a great lesson about trust. Don't overthink it. And I still find these days, I found since COVID, I have to work a little harder to memorize things. I don't know about anybody else. But even in company, my most recent thing, every show I've done here, I am backstage every single performance, going over my lines, going over lyrics, making sure that I know the movements and the choreography. But that was a really, really good lesson. The other one that I remember, we took How to Succeed on Business on a USO tour to Greenland and Goose Bay, Labrador, and Argentia, Newfoundland. We were supposed to go to Iceland, but we got fogged in. But one night we were at Goose Bay, and we were doing How to Succeed, and it was a very small house. So time for curtain call. The first members come out, next come out. I took my bow, and about at that point, there were 3 big leads to follow, and the applause just stopped. They had run out of applause. So they came out to absolute silence. They took, including Robert, took a bow. Thank you. And we're standing on stage trying not to laugh hysterically. But it's those things that you remember, the things that just do not go as you hope, or the night somebody drops a line, you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I get this back on track? Try to stay calm. But it's about trust, and it's human. I mean, we're all, that's live stage.
I was in a talent show in high school with my girlfriend, and we had to sing a song. I don't remember, but it was, there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza. And then it follows the next thing and it wraps up at the end. And about halfway through it, she skipped her line. And I'm like, well, no, you can't do that because my line's next. So I just sang my line again. And after about 3 times, she got it.
I tell you, I did a show, a terrible play called There's a Girl in My Soup at a place called the Odd Chair Playhouse in Pittsburgh.
Peter Sellers.
Yeah, it was, but not in our production. We had a very nice man named George Eisenhower who was a booth announcer at KDKA. He was charming, but a booth announcer, what do they always have? They have words in front of them. So he struggled to remember, and the problem was he didn't try to cover. He'd miss a line and go, click, 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 oh, and say it. So 2 things would happen. One night, I was supposed to be with him, and I was supposed to go off and change because I was his girlfriend. I'd get out of my thing and come back in a towel. And suddenly, he has gone so far ahead, I don't even know where he is. And I thought, do I come out? Do I stay back here? He finally, somebody else came in and found his way back. But the one I remember, he had a telephone soliloquy, which was the last scene. And we're backstage for curtain call. And he picks up the phone, he says, and there's a pause, and it's, oh, hello? Swear to you. And we're dying backstage. We laughed so hard we could barely make it through curtain call. You can't make this stuff up.
That's fantastic. You've mentioned nerves a few times.
Yeah.
Does that manifest itself on stage with you?
Not usually. You'll often see me backstage taking a really deep breath. Ethel Merman used to say, I never get nervous. If they could do it, they'd be up there instead of me. I don't believe that. I think some nerves are good because you want energy. You want excitement for the people you're performing for. If it gets crippling, I think that gets difficult. Usually once it begins, you're fine. But I think there's that element of trust and of learning. And I also think it's easier to learn when you're younger. Back when I was it 7th grade or 8th grade, I was cast as the ghost of Jacob Marley in a musical version of A Christmas Carol. Now, I must tell you, I was actually hurt because I really wanted to be Scrooge. But one boy auditioned, and he got Scrooge. But I was a good sport. I was all dressed in black. I had white powder on my face. I had black gloves and shorts and all that. I put white powder here, and my dad gave me his tire chain. So I clanked out, and I sang one song, and I clanked off. I can sing that song to this day, ladies and gentlemen. I still remember it. I think the things you learn earlier, that's why company was a little bit easier to learn now because I had learned it sooner. But I think it's like anything else. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And I'm of two minds. I think no nerves for me would not be good. I try not to let it make me so intense that I can't just get out there and focus and also enjoy it. Yeah. I mean, when you have only 10 performances to do a show you love, you want to be thrilled in every one of them. You want to love it. You want to hear the audience cheering and having the same great experience that you are. There is so much good theater in this region, all across. There are so many good companies that honestly, I used to joke I tried to get to everything. Then I tried to get to everything that my friends are doing. Now I try to get to everything that I'm doing. But
if I'm in it, I'm going to be there.
But think about the difference, because I remember visiting Palm Springs in maybe the late 90s, and other than maybe the McCallum and perhaps at that point Palm Canyon Theater, there weren't all the companies we have today. And I think some of that is a tribute to the fact that people come here, they love it here, they come here. I always say, I remember I said boomers don't retire. We have an encore. People come here, and if you're creative, you will find a place, and you will find your community, and you will find a way to create here. It's absolutely true, and you will meet amazing people, because people who do theater here, they either make no money or not much. They do it for the love of it.
Oh,
they do
100%.
it because they want to share, because they want to create. And so if you like to do theater, there is a place for you somewhere here in the Coachella Valley.
Well, Randy is a budding thespian. He studied with Terry Ray.
I did want to ask, the CV rep audition.
Yes.
I still haven't heard back. How long did it take for you to get a call?
Oh, well, these were what they called the unified auditions. You probably haven't heard yet. I will say that one thing I found is some of the groups take part in the unified auditions, but then they hold separate auditions later. Revolution Stage is one. CV Rep is also the same.
Randy did that audition in 2017, so I'm not sure that he's going to hear back.
That season has probably been cast, but...
I'm not as good looking now as I was then. So now I have no
that's
hope.
not true. You get more distinguished with age.
So I
You're
think
better
we'll
looking
see you on
today
stage
than when
at
I
the
met
band.
you.
I will see you on stage at the band. I'm sure of it. I will say that I think. I think part of it is perseverance. Some of it's the right show at the right time. I had a great time at doing Sherlock Holmes Confidential, and they said to me later, "We've loved having you. There's just really nothing you're right for this year, but we hope to welcome you back." Sure, that sounds wonderful.
Just being in Terry's classes is just, listen, getting me to drive from La Quinta to Palm Springs at 7 o'clock on a Monday night, there's no other thing I would do that for.
I drive from La Quinta to all those shows every time. But, the other thing that I have discovered is some of the companies are waiting a little bit now. And this ties back to the oversaturation of theater. Some have found that they will cast someone after the unified auditions, and then, they got something in LA or they got something else. So they're losing people. So that gives them a framework. But they also do things a little bit later and closer to time. I think... Revolution Stage just had auditions for a couple of shows they're doing in the spring.
They're churning out a lot of shows.
Yeah,
Revolution Stage.
A lot. I don't know how they do it. Something there every single night.
Yeah,
and
I know they're bringing in a lot of.
They are,
but they still produce that's a big slate that they put on.
They do a lot. Palm Canyon Theater produces a lot of shows year-round. You've got Desert Theater Works out in Indio, Desert Theatricals at the Amphitheater Rancho Mirage. We haven't talked about, Desert Performs, which does great work, and CV Rep, and I'm sure I'm missing somebody. We talked about the bet, but forgive me if I've missed somebody, but a lot of really good theater and a lot of really talented. And again, but there are places in Palm Canyon, I think, is one, or Desert Theater Works in Indio. They will use people who haven't done a lot, either children or young adults, or maybe adults who haven't been able to do it for a while and they want to get back in. There's a place for everyone, and to me that is community theater in the best sense, where you get to work with professional people, but you get to learn and you get to do shows you might not get to do anywhere else. So,
have you done any teaching?
Have I done any teaching? I've taught media relations, I've taught public relations, I have not taught theater, and I've taken theater classes, but interestingly, I don't know if my husband would confess, my husband has been taking improv classes and absolutely loves them, and that I want a script. I want to know what I'm supposed to say. But Joe he's so great at talking to people. He's so quick, and he's so quick about thinking and listening, and he's absolutely loved it. Yeah, a woman named Melanie Blue is teaching classes. So again, there are lots of theater classes, and Terry Ray's is another. If you're interested in theater, there are classes for you here too.
Yeah. Well, Barbara, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Because normally I know you're at an audition or at a rehearsal.
Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed that. You made the hour fly by, and it's been a delight to not only think back about how fortunate I've been, but of all the places we've lived, this one is really special. Look around every day. Wonderful people, a wonderful place, and to be able to have done what I'm doing here is a gift, and that includes spending this time with you. So thank you.
Have you been interviewed in a bar before?
I have not. That is a first.
Well, there we go.
But I hope not a last.
Well, I got more research here, so we got to bring her back.
Okay, we can do that.
I'll look forward. Thank you so much.
And I'll call you if I ever hear back from CV Rep.
Well, I'll look for that in 2025. Here's to us both on stage in 2025.
Cheers.
I'll drink to that.
Well, thank you again, Barbara Kerr, our guest on this edition of Big Conversations Little Bar. My thanks to Randy.
Great show.
Outstanding job. He's not just a co-host and a sidekick, but he's the research department, which is very important. And, of course, our producer, John McMullen.
I only get paid once, though.
But you're going to get a really nice year-end bonus
I'm sorry.
one year.
This is not a paid appearance today? Did I misunderstand?
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, you can pay us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll,
I just wanted to be clear.
How much fun did you have?
Another glass of water, please.
Most of our guests, it's a little gratuity for me and Randy. It's for the privilege of spending time with us.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much. Remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode of Big Conversations Little Bar, available at all of your favorite podcast platforms. And once again, our thanks to the McCallum Theatre, our presenting sponsor, McCallumTheatre.org.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Big Conversations Little Bar. Recorded on location at Skip Paige's Little Bar in Palm Desert, California, the center of the Coachella Valley universe, and presented by the McCallum Theatre, online at McCallumTheatre.org. This program is a production of the Mutual Broadcasting System. All episodes are available from BigConversationsLittleBar.com and most major podcast portals, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify.